Hello, Shadowrock here. Today I have a video going over setting up bigwigs, or more accurately, little wigs, for dungeons in the War Within Season 2. This is mostly, around Mythic Plus, and just kind of setting it up where you're more familiar with the sounds that bigwigs or little wigs will be making, so that you have a better idea of what is going on from audio cues. In especially more hectic packs, this is something I find very useful. So, just to get into it, the way that you go about setting this up is in-game. To open the Bigwigs window, either you'll have a little button on your mini-map, as you can see in the top right-hand corner of my screen here, or you can type /BW or Bigwigs, which will pop this up. And as for what you should change once you're actually in and going through and looking at the different settings, you come across here to Dungeon Bosses, and this is where you go in to change kind of what abilities show up, and this can be per boss or looking at trash, and it's fully customizable to anything that you like. This wasn't something that I personally had taken the time to go through and change until this season, and it's honestly been an incredibly strong tool, having a good idea of exactly what's happening in a pull from audio cues, because some of the pulls, especially in Cinderbrew, not only does it get really hectic because there's too many mobs to keep track of everything that's happening, but sometimes the ground visibility of mechanics is just not there. So, let's look at something other than the bosses in this dungeon, which aren't actually that bad. But I'll come across to trash, and while you can do it per boss and it'll show all their mechanics, trash will be all of the mobs throughout a dungeon. And you can go through and look at every single mechanic, as you can see here, scrolling down the entire list. And this is not what it looks like out of the box. This is my personal setup where I've made changes. Also, if you just like to have my setup for bigwigs and import my profile, as opposed to making your own and going through and changing it yourself, that is something that I do have available, and I'll have that linked in the description below. But just to go through and show how you can change things for yourself, and anytime you struggle with a mechanic or die to something after a dungeon, you can always come back in and make changes. So the first thing I did was anything that I don't really interact with, or that doesn't actually, it's not something I need to know in a key, I kind of went through and disabled the sound effects for. For example, Mean Mug, this I have turned off entirely. This is just a debuff that goes on the tank. Erupting Inferno, this is the AoE circle that goes out on players. It's very obvious when I have it as a player, so I'm not too worried about it. Plus, I have other things that'll make noises anyway. So, just going through and unchecking sound here is what stops the sound from playing, and on the sound tab is where you change what will be played based on what's available in here. Now, more important ones like Boiling Flames, when this goes off, I have a brass sound effect played. And that's just, anytime you hear that, an AoE stop is good just to stop that, because it's a channel, so it's good to keep track, because we don't typically put interrupts on that in pulls. And then, thinking about the first early pulls in Cinderbrew, where you typically have multiple hired muscles, the Thirsty effect I don't have a sound effect for, because on Havoc we can't be enraged. There's Volatile Keg, and this one you actually can go in and uncheck healer only. This is normally not something that makes a sound, but it does group damage, and it's good to know when this is coming, because if this does come with something else, it can kill you. So I did put a nice loud sound on that, while also having a sound effect on their throw chair, as those two overlapping, it can kill you, especially in that first pull. The big thing that really made me start changing and going through everything in Bigwigs this season, though, was the Cinderbrew toss in those first pulls. And this is the little yellow circle on the ground that, if you get hit by it, it'll probably kill you in almost any key over about a 15. Below that, it'll just take you to like 10% health and disorient you, and you'll probably die in that disorient as well. So every time that is cast,
Beware.
I have a loud Beware sound that casts. It's very obvious when you go in and change it per mechanic to be something that you will recognize what is happening in a given pull. And it's taken some fine-tuning pull to pull, but I've gotten it all into a spot where I like, and I figured I would just come through and make a video on this, as I think this is something that a lot of people probably have never thought about doing, is going in and changing all the sounds in Bigwigs to something they're familiar with. And I found it to be incredibly helpful. And I'll go through other dungeons, but just to quickly go through and look, same thing as cast like Rejuvenating Honey. I took a sound effect off when it's being cast, because again, it's not something we interrupt. And other casts like Spill Drink, which again, I can't actually dispel. And other things that are just basic kicks, because I'm setting my focus in a pull anyways, and I'm assigned to a certain kick, so I don't need to know when this cast starts. It doesn't help me or really do anything in any way. It just adds more sounds, and it's more audio clutter that kind of devalues all the other sounds that are coming through Bigwigs. It makes me lose track of what I need to be listening to. Another dungeon that might be a great example for this is Priory. Now, in Priory, I've also made changes per boss on sound effects, and this is actually a good example of one thing to show. A couple effects have an info alert, and the alert is when the cast happens. So when Savage Mauling starts and it hops on anybody, I hear the Flake Taken sound. And the info alert, this is when it's actually broken. So when we break the shield and they're no longer, mauling the person, I took the sound off of it because I don't really need a sound telling me that. I get a pop-up anyways, and it's not really something that I do need to know. And then, coming into Hurl Spear, I again added that Beware, which I typically do for any effect that will just kill me, because it just grabs my attention so easily. Looking at trash in this dungeon. Now, this depends really what you need to know, but for example, the Defend cast, I have a water drop sound when this comes through because it's distinct and it's its own thing, but it's not really loud and important, and just when I hear a lot of them, that's when I know to AoE stop. For Caltrops, I disabled Dispeller only so that I do get notified when they're leaping and putting traps down. And this is where I have a Beware sound when they're leaping and putting the traps down.
Beware.
But if anybody steps in a trap, I hear the Destruction yell. And this is usually something that I put on mechanics that are either like a group wipe mechanic that's been messed up, or something that's just going to kill a person.
Destruction.
Now, just taking a look at some other things. There are just a bunch of mechanics where I, again, didn't want audio cues, and by default, these all have audio sounds. The default sounds are just different kinds of dings and sound effects like that, which don't really feel like they're too descriptive of anything, and a lot of mechanics simply don't need sounds attached, and with how big a lot of pulls are this season, you tend to just get an overriding amount of dings and various sounds that don't mean anything. So, coming in and looking, into the section where you have the priests and the paladins, as well as the conjurers, the flame strike has a massive circle on the ground that is very obvious to me, and I don't need a sound effect to know that it's being played because it's a very long cast and it's very easy to get out of. So, I just got rid of the sound effect on flame strike, so I don't have that every time it's being cast. Same with Greater Heal, got rid of the sound effect on it. I don't need a sound effect for it if I'm looking to interrupt that. I'm already doing that through my set focus. The light spawns, which is the big light elementals. The burst of light when they get to 25% health. Again, this is a very long cast. It's very easy to see visually and not something that I'm ever going to get hit by. I don't need a sound effect attached to it, so I got rid of that. As well as Consecrate on the paladins, because they just spam cast this the entire pull, and it doesn't even instant tick you, so it's not really something you need to get out of. But there are important things going off in these pulls. So while I got rid of so many different things that would be making noise in these pulls, then we have Sacred Toll, which is the big damage that you take every time the paladin is cast. And it's really important to know when this is coming, because if you're ever below, like, say, 60% health and it happens, then you want to either press defensive or slam a health potion or something like that. So I put a loud rave warning on it. and every time Sacred Toll starts getting cast, that will go off. Now, I'm not going to go through and show every single dungeon and every single scenario, but there is just a lot that you can go through and change depending on the dungeon. There's a lot of mechanics that you can turn off and change the sound effects for, because you won't necessarily need it, and it will make it a lot easier to understand from the audio cues coming through Bigwigs what exactly is occurring. Next, I'd like to show a boss with some changed sound effects. For this one, I'm doing Demolition Duo and Floodgates, something where I did go through and change sound effects on. So, you can see with Quickshot, it's unchecked, and I don't have anything for it. This is just what Kiza spams this entire boss fight. She just starts shooting different people. She won't do anyone back to back, and since I have a weak aura for a spell targeted on me, I already get a sound played when I'm getting shot, so I don't need any sound on this, let alone something that's going to be playing every 2 seconds throughout the entire fight. When the bombs are called down from the sky as well, I don't have a sound effect on it. It's, pretty much at the end of every mechanic set, it's a bunch of circles on the ground. I don't need a sound effect for that either. But what I do have sound effects on there's the kinetic gel, which is the dispel that you run out to bombs. And with that one, it plays the runaway sound. Just right here.
Run away, little girl. Run away.
And just makes it a lot more obvious when that's coming out. I have a gunshot sound that plays when she does the big cone hits that you will just die if you get hit by. And lastly, there's barreling charge. Barreling charge is really annoying because it hits in such a big area around Bront, including behind him, so you really do need to pay attention on this one. And this is where I use the traditional beware again.
Beware.
Just so that I'm really watching out for barreling charges. That's the only thing that's really going to get you killed on this fight. So, again, it's good to just go through and set everything up with what you're comfortable with. And this doesn't just extend to dungeons. You can do the same thing with raid bosses through the raid bosses tab. And you can go through boss by boss and change anything that you do or want changed to whatever you like. That's everything for this video today. I made this video as many may have not considered how impactful it could be or known it was an option to make these changes and have audio cues they understand and are comfortable with. As mentioned before, if you like my bigwigs, as seen on my stream or in my other YouTube videos of my keys, I will have the link to my profile on Wago in the description, and you can freely try it out or edit it from there instead of a fresh out of the box bigwigs, just as a starting point. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, consider leaving a like, and if the content on my channel is something you enjoy, please consider subscribing. I appreciate all the support, and for now, have yourself a good one. Bye.